The T-38 pre-flight check begins on your way to the airplane. As you approach your aircraft, look over the surrounding area for any loose items, puddles of oil or fuel under the aircraft, and the aircraft itself for anything out of the ordinary. All too often, pilots get absorbed in the details of the inspection and miss the big picture. Look at the whole aircraft. After reaching the aircraft, check the 781. Ensure that you have the correct one for your aircraft. Check aircraft status, proper servicing, and existing write-ups. Often, important write-ups like dual-only restrictions, inoperative components, and overdue inspections won't be readily apparent. Remember, if you're solo and you need an exceptional release, you must get the 781 signed off by a maintenance supervisor or officer. An IP cannot sign the release for you. After you're satisfied with the aircraft status, the pilot in command will stow the forms. Do this right away. We've lost a lot of good aircraft because of forms down the intake. Next, check that the seat and canopy safety pins are installed. Check that the seat pack tie-down strap is secure. Check that the oxygen hose retention strap is secure. Adjust if necessary. Ensure that the two seat attach bolts, which are located behind the headrest, are properly aligned. The yellow arrows should point to the bolts, as shown here. Check that the left side cover fits closely and conforms to the contour of the drogue chute container. The forward edge of the cover should fit inside or below the edge of the container. The right cover is fixed in place. Ensure that the required publications are on board and that they are current. Next, turn the battery switch on and check the fuel and oxygen quantity by pressing the fuel and oxygen check switch to the quantity check position. Don't forget to turn the battery switch off after this check. Next, check that the wing flap lever is up. If the flaps are other than full up, the flap lever must be set to correspond with the actual flap position. Otherwise, inadvertent flap extension or retraction will occur when AC power is applied. Also, check the landing gear lever in the down position and that the radio transfer switch is in the forward position. That completes the before exterior inspection. Now let's cover the exterior inspection checklist. Begin your inspection at the left forward section by checking the number 1 engine air intake duct and the smaller ram air inlet duct. Carefully check their physical condition and for possible foreign objects lying inside. This is a critical area because any foreign object, no matter how small, may cause serious damage to the engines. As you move past the ladder, check the aircraft for loose fasteners, protruding external steps, and open access doors. Missing fasteners forward of the intakes are considered FOD unless they're written up in the forms. As you move forward, be sure to check all cabin drains. There are 3 on each side, located here near the intake, under the front cockpit, by the nose section, and 1 on the underside for a total of 7. You may want to open them to drain water from the aircraft after it rains, but make sure you've closed all drains before you fly. If the hexagon valve is out, flush with the fitting which surrounds it, you're okay. If you should leave one of the drain valves open, the cockpit may not pressurize properly. Also, make sure to leave the fuel drains alone. They look just like the cabin drains, except they are after the intake and usually painted red. Now ensure that the cabin pressurization static ports are clear of obstructions. To inspect the nose gear wheel well, first open the door and look at its surface. Then, look up in the wheel well itself and check the various components for damage and hydraulic leaks. Although not specifically mentioned in your checklist, you should check that the alternate gear extension striker plate is in the vertical position. The striker plate is located high on the rear wall of the nose wheel well and is a little difficult to see. If it's parallel to the ground, it indicates that the alternate gear release system has been used and may not have been recycled. This condition deactivates the nose wheel steering and hydraulic pressure to the gear. Reset the striker plate by placing the switch, located near the left rudder pedal in the front cockpit, up. This rearms the system, which will recycle when hydraulic pressure is applied. However, the striker plate won't return to the vertical position until the gear is retracted on takeoff. Next, remove the nose gear safety pin. Examine the hydraulic lines on the nose gear strut and check the strut for proper extension. With full fuel, the nose gear strut should be between 5 3/4 and 6 1/8 inches extended. As a technique, that's about 4 fingers. Take hold of the scissors and check for any excess movement. There may be some sideways movement, but there should be almost no up and down movement. Look the tire over carefully for cuts, proper inflation, and excessive wear. If any cord is seen, regardless of color, the nose tire must be replaced. Move forward to the front of the aircraft and check the pitot tube. All openings should be clear of obstructions to allow normal pitot-static system operation. Now let's review the right forward section of the checklist. Here's something that's easy to miss, and it isn't in your checklist. There's a comm access panel on the right side near the nose. Make sure it's been properly closed. Remove the AOA block and check the AOA vane. The AOA vane is easily damaged, so be careful during this inspection. Stow the AOA vane lock in the stowage box in the front cockpit. Check the right cabin pressurization static port area to ensure the portholes are free from obstructions. Also, begin checking the cabin drains on your way back to the intake. This is a drain valve that's open. Notice how the hexagon valve is recessed from its fitting. You'll need to push the valve in further and turn it slightly to get it to close flush with the fitting. There's one more cabin drain to check we haven't talked about yet. It's the front cockpit stickwell drain, and it looks a little different than the others. Open the drain by pushing on the center of the hexagon fitting. The stick has been known to freeze after cruising at high altitudes because of water in the stickwell. Check the brake fluid reservoir for proper fluid level. As a minimum, fluid should be visible through the porthole. Ensure that the fuel system manual filler caps are secure. Also, the right inlet ducts should be checked in the same manner as the left inlet ducts. Now let's start on the right center section. Look up into the speed brake well and check the area and components for physical condition and hydraulic leaks. Examine the right main gear wheel well very closely. There are many hydraulic lines in this area. Take your time and carefully inspect for any loose components, physical damage, and hydraulic leaks. Check the wing root radius area for scratches and cracks. This area should contain no scratches or cracks. Look closely at the main gear door and check it for general condition. Visually inspect the alternate gear extension cable for its condition and that it's properly routed around the pulley. Follow the hydraulic lines that take fluid to the main gear strut and check these over for leaks. Remove the landing gear safety pin. Check the main landing gear strut extension. 3 fingers work well here. Next, examine the brake discs for proper play by placing your fingers on the brake disc and trying to move it in and out. If it fails to move, the brakes are too tight and may drag when the aircraft is taxied. If the brake is too loose, the disc will almost move out of the slot and should be tightened. About a nickel's width movement is the limit. The brake disc may be hot, so be careful during this check. Check the slot in the disc. If any slot is considerably wider than the others, you probably have a broken disc. Carefully examine the tire for cuts, proper inflation, and exposed cords. Different brands of tires have different cord limits. However, any brand of tire that has red cord showing is unacceptable. Next, check the wheel lug nut for proper installation and that it's safetied with a cotter pin. The wheel lug nut is properly installed when there are 0 to 1.5 threads visible outside the lug nut. Inspect the aileron access panel carefully. Tap on the underside to detect any loose fasteners, and make sure the inspection stickers are in place. Stop at the tip of the wing and check the position light for cracked lenses. Also, check the wing for general condition, loose fasteners, or delamination. Since there's no hydraulic pressure on the ailerons, they'll probably droop. Check the flaps gently and inspect the flap attach bolts. Now let's check the right aft section. Check the hydraulic reservoir for proper fluid level. If the aircraft has been flown recently, the fluid level may be above the top index. This is okay as long as a bubble shows at the top of the gauge. Not specifically listed, but important to check, are the engine bleed ports. They should be free from any obstruction. There is no set position for the ports, but both ports on that engine should be opened or closed the same amount. Open the oil reservoir access door and ensure that the oil filler cap is tightly secured and that the cap handle is lying flat. Then, close the access door and secure it. Examine the underside of the fuselage for physical damage or loose fasteners. Pay particular attention to any excessive oil drainage, fuel, and hydraulic fluid leaks. It's a good idea to check for loose fasteners and the access panel stickers on the bird cage. Now let's inspect the aft section. Check the physical condition of the tail section as you move around the slab. Carefully inspect the tailpipe, nozzles, and fuel spray bars for general condition and pooled fuel or oil. Pay particular attention to cracks around the edges of the tailpipes. The nozzles of both engines should be circular. The left side inspection is identical to the right, but in reverse order. At the completion of your inspection, store the pins in the fuel pre-check valve compartment. The pre-check valve is located below the left intake and just behind the single-point refueling receptacle. If the crew chief has taken care of the pins for you, it's a good idea to check for all three of them before he stows them. Well, those are the basics of the T-38 Walkaround. There are a lot more things to know about the T-38, so ask your IP. One more thing before you strap on your jet, though. Step back and take one last look at the aircraft. And have a good flight.
Graham will take you through the normal procedure section of the T-38 checklist. Part 1 of this program will discuss the interior inspection, engine start, before taxi and taxi checks, and the instrument cockpit check. Part 2 of this program is on a second videotape and will discuss the before and after takeoff checks, in-flight checks, and the landing and shutdown checks. Get your checklist and have a seat. It's time to strap on a T-38. Look at page N-5 in your checklist, or page 2-2 in your -1 for the interior inspection, cockpit, all flights. Listen and follow along as we go through a typical interior inspection. Battery switch on. Intercom switches, 3 out, volumes turned up. Crew retractable steps stowed. Survival kit, if applicable, attached and adjusted. Safety belt, shoulder harness, gold key, oxygen connectors, G-suit, and chin strap. Ensure all are fastened and adjusted. Ejection seat hand grips down with 2 pins. Oxygen system, price check. circuit breakers in, center, and left. Gear door switch, normal. Flight director switch, on. Auxiliary flap switch, normal. Rudder trim knob, centered. Throttles, off. Speed brake, open. Compass switch, mag. Fuel shutoff switches, normal, guarded. Landing gear alternate release handle, in. Landing taxi light switch, off. Landing gear lever, down with 3 green. Airspeed Mach indicator, 1 at 710, 1 at straight up, and your pre-calculated go-no-go speed set at 130 knots. Standby attitude indicator, uncaged and adjusted. Accelerometer, 3 on 1G. Clock set and wound, showing 10:54 and a good hack. Steering mode switch is normal. Nav mode switch, TACAN, and marker beacon light, press to test. Radio transfer switches, COM and NAV, both in front. Antenna switch, auto. UHF radio, both, channel 2, preset, squelch is on. TACAN, channel 70X, TR, ILS 109.9, power on. Ensure magnetic compass has no cracks or bubbles, and heading looks good. Altimeter, standby. 3020, indicating 760 feet. VVI is 0. Cabin altimeter should indicate approximately field elevation. Cabin pressure switch, cabin press. Cabin air temperature switch, auto. Pitot heat and anti-ice, both off. Boost pump switches, on. Crossfeed, off. Generator switches, on, guarded. IFF, SIF, standby. Mode 3A and C toggle switches are on and squawking 0636. Warning test. Ensure you have a light in the handle, horn, fires, master caution, AOA, canopy, and a full caution warning panel illuminated. Interior and position lights are set. Formation lights, off. Rotating beacon, on. Forms and pubs stowed. Okay, that completes the interior inspection. I'm ready for engine start.
In years past, pilots were forced to endure a slow, often frustrating task before flying off into the sunset, starting their engines. Through much trial and error, starting the engines has become somewhat less complicated and less time-consuming. This program will demonstrate the finely tuned process for starting the T-38. Let's begin by reviewing the starting engine's checklist. We'll cover each step individually, and then we'll take a look at an actual engine start. Danger areas. Clear. Check all areas near your jet for anything which could cause damage during engine start or as you leave the parking area. Be sure it's safe before you initiate the start. You need a crew chief, a fire bottle, and clear intakes. Looks good. Let's continue. External air. Apply. Signal the crew chief to apply air and hold your hands clear, away from all switches and controls. He'll repeat your signal, start the airflow, and return to monitor the start. Check the number 2 RPM gauge. When you have approximately 14% RPM, signal the crew chief that you are starting number 2 engine. Press the start button and hack the clock simultaneously. If you don't have 14% RPM, you may continue the start, providing you have at least 12%. After pressing the start button, check the number 2 EGT gauge. If the gauge is powered, an on flag will be in view. Some gauges have off flags which will disappear when power is applied. Now that you can monitor the engine start, advance the number 2 throttle to idle. Immediately cross-check the fuel flow gauge. The fuel flow should not exceed 360 prior to ignition. If it does, retard the throttle back to the off position and maintain airflow to purge fuel and vapors from the engine. Wait at least 2 minutes before attempting another start. After checking fuel flow, check the oil pressure gauge for an indication of oil pressure. Now, check the EGT gauge again. Ignition should occur within 12 seconds after the first fuel flow indication. Monitor the EGT. It will peak at or below 845 and then stabilize. Before proceeding to the next step, here are some situations to consider. First, if the EGT does not begin to rise within 12 seconds after your first fuel flow indication, abort the start. Next, if the generator has not reached cut-in speed prior to the end of the 30-second start cycle, push and hold the start button until the generator cuts in. If the EGT reaches 845, abort the start. This should prevent the temperature from exceeding 925. If you abort a start, a restart may be attempted as long as the EGT did not